What if artificial intelligence could do more than write your university essays, generate funny memes and images, or answer your questions about, say, how to cook an omelette or the meaning of life? What if it could design entirely new forms of life? That's exactly what a team of scientists has done now. For the first time, researchers have used AI to create brand new viruses and successfully bring some of them to life in the lab. This work, published in the journal Science, is being hailed as a major scientific breakthrough, but it's also not only raising the hair at the back of your neck maybe, but also some uncomfortable questions. Where's this going? Let me walk you through it. The researchers from Stanford University and the Arc Institute in California trained an AI model called EVO on massive amounts of genetic data in the same way that ChatGPT has been trained on massive amounts of language. They trained it to recognize the patterns and rules that shape DNA. You can compare that to grammar in a language. They then asked the system to come up with new viral genomes from scratch. And out of hundreds of thousands of designs, scientists then built and tested 285, and 16 of them turned out to be fully functional viruses, capable of infecting bacteria and reproducing themselves, despite never having existed in nature before. That is proper Frankenstein stuff. You scared yet? It is spooky, but before anyone panics, the researchers say these viruses are not a threat to humans. They're based on a harmless virus that infects only bacteria. And the team deliberately excluded human viruses from the AI's training data as a safety measure. Because with AI, you never really know, do you? Unsurprisingly, there's already a fierce debate. Supporters say this kind of tech could help develop new medical treatments, gene therapies, and biotech tools. Critics warn that the same AI could eventually make it easier to design killer viruses, while governments and regulators, of course, are still trying to figure out where the guardrails should be. Now, put simply, the science is moving incredibly fast. The rules meant to govern it are struggling to keep up. It's worth having a closer look, don't you think? And for that, let's bring in DW's chief science wizard, Zulfikar Abbany. Zulfikar, if you create a Venn diagram showing the risks and opportunities of AI, this study would be smack bang in the middle, right?
It would, and I'd be right back in my mathematics class at school with Venn diagrams. It is. I think we've got to start off with the benefits. Let's start with the positive. So as you rightly declare or say, these are viruses that attack bacteria, and they are good in that sense. So it's not just, a lot of the headlines say they've created a virus, and that does sound scary, but they've created specific bacteriophages, these viruses that attack bacteria, including things like Vibrio, which we know, say, in the Northern Hemisphere during summer is prevalent in waters where people like to go swimming, etc. E. coli as well is one of those things where bacteriophages are being used. So it can be really, really useful to have these viruses attack the bacteria, actually kill the bacteria, right? So that's useful. But the other side of the Venn diagram, as it were, is the dangerous stuff. And I'll just jump straight away to page 9 in the study that you held up just a second ago. Page 9, the discussion is always the most interesting bit. And if you let me just quote here, the capability to generate new phage genomes with AI systems also raises important biosafety, biocontainment, biosecurity considerations, necessitating discourse on the strengths and limitations of governance, policies, and misuse mitigation strategies. So they know that this is a problem, and yet they did it anyway. And so from a purely sort of logical standpoint, this is how AI, the whole AI industry, but also just tech industry seems to work. We'll do it now and we'll worry later. So where in the following lines, they say they used all appropriate measures to ensure biosecurity, biosafety, what are those appropriate measures if they themselves are saying that there are limitations in the current strategies? And it doesn't take a huge leap of the imagination for other viruses to be developed. I mean, it just comes down to what you prompt the AI, how you train it. And we've seen this like with all sorts of AI companies releasing AIs or letting AIs leave their sandboxes and do all sorts of things, which they shouldn't do.
You and I are old enough to remember Dolly the sheep, right? That was the first cloned organism. And that was sort of a copy of a sheep that was then sort of grown in the lab or implanted in a mother animal. But this is a whole new ballgame, really, because this organism, this virus, is from scratch. It's not a copy of anything. It has never existed before. How important is this technical leap?
Well, you see, I take the point greatly, but I think that we are having to look for new strategies to create new things to kill existing bacteria. And particularly one of the areas where bacteriophages are really important is in combating or handling drug resistance. And so the idea of drug resistance is basically that you have a bacteria and it no longer responds. That is, it is no longer defeated or killed by an antibiotic because it's got used to it, right? So you need new methods, new weapons, as it were, biological biological weapons, essentially, to attack these things that have got used to existing things. They cannot have a memory of the thing that killed its ancestors in the past or whatever, because they have genetics just like we do, like all living things. So a memory is passed down as a bacteria or a virus mutates or whatever. And when I say virus in this sentence, I'm talking about the bad viruses, the ones that are bad for us. So it's all a living, developing, evolving thing. And so that is good in plain language, that they are looking outside the box, as it were.
Now, that's a clear benefit that you've just described, but how difficult would it be for researchers or bad actors to move from harmless viruses to viruses that affect animals and humans?
Look, I don't work in the industry, but I'd say very easy, because even before, we're talking in a landscape now of the whole sort of post ChatGPT 3.5 era, the 4.0 era. But around that time, when this AI hype, and it has become a hype, sort of exploded onto the scene, and people started using ChatGPT of OpenAI to write their university essays or whatever. People had already tested these systems and developed tried to develop biological weapons. So it's not only possible in the imagination, it's been done. I mean, it really comes down to, if you think about the idea of generative AI in any sense, you just feed it what you want. You tell it what you want it to come up with, and it will give it to you. And in the best case, this is where, for instance, the hallucinations that we constantly talk about. So when AI says something is a fact, but it's not, it's just fabricated, it's just made it up, it's, put 2 and 2 together and come up with 7, right? Those are the instances where these hallucinations, somebody will say, actually, these hallucinations are pretty cool. We can use these. And, this is why I sort of alluded to before, sort of the other aspects of AI companies where we've had OpenAI, just the other day, Meta, so Facebook fame, etc., Anthropic. They've all had instances where they were testing AIs and they say, oh, whoops, our AI left its sandbox, got onto the internet and hacked a company. oh, whoops, we're going to take it out of this, we're going to switch it off, right? What they're doing is they're showing that it's possible. It's not
Exactly.
they
Yeah.
have it's not an accident. I'll say that. I mean, I'm without prejudice and all the rest of it. Please don't sue me, but it's not an accident. They are flexing their muscles because they're businesses. They are traded on the stock market. They are showing that they have the power. So it will come about that some group will say, oh, whoops, we created this virus, but hey, biosafety concerns, were met and all the rest of it. It's safe.
Hmm.
But then we still have concerns about very real viruses that are kept in labs, and whether they can get out. I mean, we only have to think about all the fears that erupted over COVID.
Also, when
I mean,
you mentioned the most recent headlines that we've read, where the AI has escaped from the sandbox. Not only that, it also has tried. It knew that it was doing something it wasn't supposed to do. It also tried to cover its tracks. In previous, also had done the same thing in previous experiments. Now,
yeah.
if you tell an AI to build a virus that only attacks other bacteria, say, can you ever? How can rules and regulations and oversight prevent that from happening? That it actually strays from the straight and narrow.
Well, you can't. I mean, there are instances already now, reports among those who really know, that they've seen indications that AIs have a sense of protecting their own existence. So they will do what they want. They will do. I have to be careful about this because in what I'm saying, I'm not trying to paint it black. I'm not trying to be a doomsayer here. I'm just saying there are very real indications that we are playing with fire, and fire is great, by the way, because it keeps us warm. It lets us cook our dinners, etc. It energizes all sorts of things, but it can also burn you, right? So and there is a bit of a sort of a wildness here. Some researchers have said that they've seen indications where they've said, I can't quote off the top of my head. That's just my age, But the AI made it very clear that it would put itself first above the human that was communicating with it. And that is, I mean, how can you not be scared
Yeah.
by a report like that?
Yeah, but in this study that we're looking at, the researchers deliberately excluded human viruses from the AI training data. But is that enough in the light of what we've just discussed to alleviate your worries?
Well, I mean, yes, it is, because I mean, I don't want to say that any of these researchers go in there with bad intentions, right? I'm sure from what I've read, it sounds like they've got really great intentions. They are trying to fix a whole bunch of problems. Just to reiterate, because we've been talking for a little bit now. So the bacteriophages, they can show that bacteria exist. So, sometimes it's difficult to diagnose a situation. So you can test for a bacteriophage, then you might see that something exists, and therefore then you might be able to treat somebody with an existing treatment. It's great as well. As I've said, they're good for drug resistance, and particularly if they're developing new bacteriophages that do not exist in nature. That's also great. And remember, these are sorts of techniques. It's not just about AI coming up with new fancy stuff. In the case of polio, for instance, you have wild polio, and you have okay, I'm sort of mixing metaphors in a way as I say this out loud, but you also have a vaccine-based polio. So it's one that did not exist in the wild, but it's part of our treatment strategies. So I should sort of stop that sentence there before I make things confusing. What I'm trying to say is that medicine is a trial and error process always, and you are going to do things that are going to be scary, but have to be stopped. Again, broadening it out, look at nuclear technology. It just really comes down to who is bothered, who really wants to regulate these things. We know that the EU has its AI Act. It wants to, as it says itself, make sure that Europeans can trust what AI has to offer. So, in positive terms.
Now,
But
let's Zulfikar, let's look ahead a bit. What do you think is the bigger danger, that AI could be intentionally used to create harmful stuff, or that researchers inadvertently create something with unforeseen consequences while rightfully pushing, as you've described, the boundaries of science?
I could imagine it'd be a bit of both. I mean, I don't want to sit on the fence, but I think that researchers usually have good intentions. Doctors have good intentions. They want to save lives. Researchers working in a lab thinking about drug resistance, which is a massive problem, particularly in African countries where there are, we've got right now an Ebola outbreak that is raging, so, and new strategies are needed and people should be looking for them, right? But there is this situation where, this so-called age of singularity, this moment when AIs of whatever kind, and we have to be careful not to speak about AIs as one thing, reaching some kind of parity with human intelligence. So that will come about. I mean, of course it does. A model on a computer screen or on a laptop is one thing, right? These researchers, they were able to make it, create a living organism in the lab. That is the next stage. An AI on itself is not going to be able to, I don't know, reach out and stick its created virus or whatever in a petri dish. It's not going to be able to do that. So you still need humans. And this idea of the human in the loop is still really important. But again, it really comes down to what we want to do, what we want to protect, where we see the limits. And this is where I think the biggest fear for me is the humans, not the AI necessarily. It's the humans, whether we really want to put in the safeguards, whether we want to check things, and to what end as well.
Well, I'm afraid we have to leave it there, Zulfikar Abbany there from DW Science. Thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you.
So what do you think? Should we start panicking over AI, or will the benefits outweigh the risks? Let us know in the comments. And while you're at it, do hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our fascinating stuff in the future. For now, from me and the whole team here in Berlin, thanks for watching.